Most people think starting over is the hard part, but it isn't. What feels dangerous is continuing, staying with the same goal, the same direction, the same version of yourself. So if you've ever felt a quiet resistance when nothing is technically wrong, there's a reason for that. There's a strange resistance that shows up when you try to continue, not when you fail, not when you quit, but when you attempt to stay. You decide to keep going with the same goal, the same direction, the same version of yourself. And suddenly, your body tightens. Your energy drops. Your thoughts begin circling. It doesn't feel like laziness. It feels like hesitation without a clear reason. As if something inside you is saying, "This isn't safe." From the outside, continuation makes sense. You already started. You've already learned. You're not starting from zero. But logic rarely convinces the nervous system. You can understand something intellectually and still feel unable to move inside it. That disconnect between what you know and what you feel is often mistaken for self-sabotage. But it isn't. It's memory. Most people assume they're afraid of failing again, but failure is familiar. Failure has shape. Failure, strangely, feels survivable. What feels dangerous is staying visible. Continuation keeps you in view. It keeps your patterns recognizable. It removes the excuse of starting fresh. And when you remain visible, you remain exposed. At some point, being yourself came with a cost. Maybe it was criticism, withdrawal, distance, silence. Maybe you learned that consistency made you easier to evaluate, easier to judge, easier to dismiss. So adaptation became protection. You learned to adjust, to reinvent, to restart before someone else decided for you. Reinvention offers distance. A new identity creates space between who you were and what hurt. It gives you plausible deniability. If it doesn't work, you can say, "That wasn't really me." Continuation doesn't offer that comfort. It asks you to remain intact while moving forward. And that can feel unbearable if safety was once conditional. Your nervous system doesn't prioritize growth. It prioritizes safety, not progress, not achievement, not meaning, safety. If consistency once led to disconnection, your system learned to associate staying with danger, so it interrupts. It creates doubt. It manufactures reasons to pivot. Not to sabotage you, but to protect you. Starting over feels active, intentional, clean. It gives you movement without exposure, change without vulnerability. You can stay busy without staying present. And because it looks like growth, it's rarely questioned. But constant restarting isn't always ambition. Sometimes it's avoidance dressed as progress. When continuation feels heavy, people assume something is wrong. They push harder. They add pressure. They try to discipline themselves through it. But resistance isn't always refusal. Sometimes it's a request for safety, for reassurance, for permission to remain without being punished for it. Safety isn't comfort. It isn't certainty. Safety is knowing that you won't be abandoned for staying recognizable, that your value isn't tied to constant improvement, that your presence isn't a liability. Without that, continuation feels like standing still in front of an open door, waiting to be judged. Continuation doesn't begin with confidence. It begins with containment, with creating an internal environment where consistency doesn't feel risky, where you can return to the same effort, the same identity, without bracing for loss. Staying requires support, even if that support is quiet, internal, and slow. Real growth doesn't ask you to vanish. It doesn't demand replacement. It doesn't require proof. It happens when you're allowed to remain present long enough for meaning to accumulate. When safety replaces urgency, depth replaces speed. Nothing has to be forced. Readiness isn't feeling fearless. It's feeling safe enough to stay. Safe enough to be seen again. Safe enough to continue without armor. Safe enough to let familiarity exist without self-editing. If continuation feels difficult, it doesn't mean you're incapable. It means something in you still remembers when staying hurt. This isn't about pushing through resistance. It's about listening to it. About recognizing that your hesitation isn't a flaw, it's information. You don't need to replace yourself to grow. You don't need to disappear to move forward. Sometimes the most meaningful work is making it safe to stay. Thank you for watching. This is Inner Frame Theory, reminding you to always look inward.